It happened on the mysterious Isle of Seacliffe by Ian Gordon. 7. A blood moon rises. December 28th, 10 p.m. The strangeness intensifies here on Seacliffe. The advent of clear skies this evening revealed the moon above the ocean. Having drifted off for a few hours around 4 p.m., I first observed the waxing gibbous sphere a little after 7. Curiously, though, it's ruddy, just as one expects it to be when observing a lunar eclipse. A sizable crowd had gathered on the market square, the red moon the subject of their attention. Pulling myself together, I donned the requisite winter wear and joined the locals outside. I recognized a few faces: Miss Black, the 3 boys, Moffat, Howie, and Hodds, and the old miner James Johnston, who looked weirdly reinvigorated there on the precinct. The 7 sisters were present too. The stage they danced upon on the 26th had been moved to the east end of the square, overlooking the sea. Upon it, the 6 ladies stood in a line, their gazes fixed on the blood moon. The eyes of all were focused on the crimson satellite, its arrival of obvious significance. Some minutes after my appearance, the head of the 7 sisters, the lady in grey, turned to address the throng of some 100 strong. The first thing she uttered, though unintelligible to my ears, was undoubtedly the same phrase barked at me by the old miner Johnston. 2 on 1, she cried. Her captivated audience, the citizens of Redditch, counted in unison, 2 on 1, and, employing equally illegible phrases, the lady in grey continued her strange sermon. It'd be futile to attempt to phoneticize the bits and pieces I can recall, but after each lengthy outpouring, the lady would cry that same unforgettable phrase, 2 on 1, and the attentive listeners would respond in kind. The glowing orb climbed higher and higher in pursuit of the meridian, tainting the waters below it a deep red. The scene was ghastly. An eerie address conducted under a foreign moon, all and sundry coloured an ill shade of scarlet, the shrill tones of the lady in grey penetrating each and every quarter of the crowded square. And then, quite unexpectedly, the lady in grey's gaze caught mine, and she directed a bony finger at me. Coherent, familiar words followed. The stranger in our midst, Mr. Howarth, wants to believe, she began. He's afraid to recall, but he will. 2 on 1, he will. She paused for a moment. Observe his smooth skin, the lady continued, his flaxen hair, his bright blue eyes. 100 faces turned to study me, 100 hardy, weather-beaten mugs eyeballing me with the kindliest intensity. I smiled nervously, the sensation of burning behind my ears assailing me again. Doesn't look like an islander, does he? Came the speaker, her shrill tones piercing every ear. But it matters not, for he wants to believe. 2 on 1, he wants to believe. I held the lady's gaze, afraid to look away. She was right, of course. I wanted to believe in the existence of the sleeping king, to believe in the cliffside sirens that had called to me on Boxing Day, to believe in the creeping critters, and even the unlikely pier pirate, as described by young Moffat. But how could I? We fiction writers love to dwell on the odd and the unexplained, but rarely are we afforded the evidence required to nurture belief. I mean, it's fun to entertain the idea of ghosts and ghouls, but what proof do they offer us other than the brief materializations at the ends of dark, interminable corridors? Hard data is severely lacking in this respect. Instead, we're offered ambiguity, with which unexplainable phenomena is left open to interpretation. Just what was that I saw out of the corner of my eye? How on earth is that desk able to float in mid-air in the middle of an empty room? and that mournful voice that whispers to me in the dead of night, to whom does it belong? But that voice I speak of, the one I hear sometimes in my dreams, those queer, hazy dreams, once said that belief in a thing doesn't require evidence. Pushing rationality aside, I called upon those dark, dimly remembered dreams for guidance, visions of the seafront, that titanic rock, faces surrounding me. Had I dreamt of the moon, too? A blood moon? Somewhat mechanically, I looked towards the blood moon and bowed deeply. Why I did so, I haven't the foggiest, but it was almost as though something instructed me, something that dwelled deep in my subconscious. Acknowledging my salute, the lady in grey cried, 211! Zealously, the audience sang it back to her. Turning to the crimson moon once again, she bowed, much in the manner I had, and, followed by her faithful companions, climbed down from the stage and marched across the square in the direction of Wendell Passage. The crowd gradually dispersed, leaving just 2 individuals on the square, myself and a cordial-looking, middle-aged lady. The stranger, another typical islander, I thought, approached me. "Hello, Edgar," she said, and I was immediately drawn in by the familiarity of her voice. Featherlight it was, as delicate as the night zephyr. "Hello," I began, clutching for a name. "Catherine," she provided. "Oh, hello, Catherine," I said, and I realized that I was nervous in her presence, befuddled and disarmed by both the softness of her voice and the geniality of her countenance. "You have to go back," she continued. "Back?" I asked, puzzled. "To Silver Street," she clarified. Silver Street, that grey and deserted cul-de-sac I'd managed to avoid on my way to James Johnston's place. "I felt drawn to that place for sure," I said. "Why is that?" But Catherine, the stranger with the gentle voice and the friendly face, simply shook her head, adding, "That's precisely why you have to go back." And with those words, my new friend strolled away into the darkness. I watched the blood moon for a few moments longer, and then, feeling tendrils of cold creeping up my spine, I returned to the pub post-haste. And here I've been ever since, musing over the nature of the blood moon and the strange sermon, but more so over my encounter with the mysterious Catherine, the familiar lady with the magical voice. My obsession with Seacliffe is threatening to reveal things I'm not sure I want to know. Have I been here before? Or are these moments of hazy recollection merely figments of my overactive imagination? I fear that I'll know the answer to those questions tomorrow, after I've faced whatever awaits me on that drab cul-de-sac known as Silver Street. Thanks for listening today, folks. Join us again tomorrow for the next part.